Great. Well, I'll kick things off here. I'll keep an eye on the waiting room to let people in as they join. But welcome everybody to our second webinar in our 2021 series, a quick guide to wellness while working from home. Obviously a really relevant topic for all of us as we've been pretty much stuck in our homes for the better part of the last year. So by way of introduction, I'm Victoria Yanikos, the CEO of the Americas for Capella Workplace Solutions. I'm joined by my co-founder who is in our Dublin office. I'm here in New York, Karina Turley, and of course also joined by our keynote speaker today, Suzanne Leyden of the WellNow company. How are you, Suzanne? It's great to see you.
I'm great, thanks. Great to see you too. Thanks a million for having me.
Wonderful. So just a couple of quick housekeeping tips and a bit of background information before we dive in. So I know that we are all Zoom experts at this point. So per usual, if you have questions, please pop those into the chat and we'll do our best to get to as many of those by the end of the webinar as possible. And just for a bit of background information on our two companies in case you're not familiar. So I'm with Capella Workplace Solutions and we make working from home safe and wellness achievable through our home office risk assessment tools. So making sure your employees are set up correctly and safely at home. We're also leading the force on providing practical tools to employers as they navigate having a much larger hybrid workforce post-pandemic. And of course, Suzanne Leyden with the WellNow company. Suzanne is the co-founder of the WellNow company. She's also a certified nutritionist and health and wellness coach. Suzanne actually has a really interesting background because she comes from a very different industry, having worked in TV, film, advertising production, making a pivot to health and wellness and being a health coach. She is a business owner, of course, and the mom of 3 young children. So when you talk about understanding the dynamics of high pressure from a lot of different angles, Suzanne certainly has a lot of both personal and professional perspective when it comes to wellness. So we're so delighted to have you with us today, Suzanne, and to share your expertise with the team and the group here. So maybe just to kick things off, Suzanne, I know you and I could talk wellness all day, every day. And one of the things you and I have been talking about has been just the concept of wellness over this past year and how it really has risen to the forefront of a lot of our conversations. And in a lot of ways, that's very understandable. I mean, we're living through a global pandemic. A lot of us now, a year later, can acknowledge we're working longer hours, the stresses are more intense. But even with some of those known factors, the impact in this past year is still a little bit misunderstood when it comes to wellness. To kick things off, can you just talk to us about why our wellness has been so impacted in such a unique way this past year?
Yeah, well, thanks a million again, Victoria, for having me. It's been quite a traumatic experience, I think, for everybody in this last year, and how quickly working from home came about for so many people. And we talk an awful lot about companies pivoting, and we're probably all sick of the word pivot, but individuals had to pivot so much who were working from home. Their whole existence changed overnight. And that in itself has been incredibly stressful. And this idea of working from home pre-pandemic was something that a lot of people were striving for, particularly working parents, I think, because they wanted the flexibility around childcare and all of that. But this happened just so overnight that people were ill prepared. And that has had a knock-on effect in terms of health and wellness for sure. And loads of research has been done more recently. And I think we all kind of hear about people feeling more productive in terms of now that they're working from home. I was looking at quite a good survey. It was just nicely presented and everything from a company called Typeform, which you may be familiar with. They're a bit like SurveyMonkey, but they surveyed 2,000 of their customers, over half of which were employees, the others were CEOs. But from the employee results, the 43% of them perceive that they are more productive now working from home, which is probably no surprise. But 37% said that they are more or much more stressed, and 35% believe working from home has a negative or very negative impact on their physical health. So I think those two statistics are really interesting to focus on, because this is a year on now. Those results are quite recent. And it's like, well, there's only so much we can do, continue on in this way without addressing it. And I think everybody's kind of clambering now. I think when we went over the year mark, there was a definite slump in motivation and energy that it was palpable. I felt it. I don't think anyone has escaped it. But yeah, so we kind of look then at what are the common pain points for working from home. And the first one that jumps to mind is that the environment is not fit for purpose, because for a lot of people, unless you are lucky enough to have a designated office space beforehand, you could be working from your kitchen table or from your bedroom, and it's a very challenging environment to be working in. Then there are other things like financial pressures, family circumstances. So you might have young children at home, you might have adult children at home who are also working. So there could be 4 adults working and sitting around a kitchen table, you know, like it's really stressful environments like that. So health has been impacted. There's a lack of connection causing loneliness, but also causing communication being much more difficult with friends and family, but with work and with work colleagues. There's also the fact you kind of can't switch off from work, yet you're home all day. It's this kind of juxtaposition of these 2 ideas, which is really interesting to look at as well. And then this kind of lack of structure and motivation is low. But I feel like going through that list is like doomsday. So it's not all bad. And I'm hoping today that I can kind of talk through some tips to help people take control a little bit of what they can control, and make some positive tweaks and changes to their current circumstances to have a positive impact on their health. So if we kind of look then to what the personal, like you chunk it down a bit further and you look at the personal health related issues that we face from working from home. And these then become things like lack of exercise, because we're sitting working for so long, and it's easier to just stay working because you don't have to go and commute home or whatever. So you're static a lot more of the time. Overeating is a big one. I've had a lot of clients, new clients, come to me having put on what they feel is a substantial amount of weight over the last year. And it's because you're comfort eating, it's accessible to you all the time, and it's also kind of a mindless eating. You're maybe bringing food to your desk that you wouldn't in a work environment and that kind of thing. Energy is low, but that's probably, you know, there's lots of things that would impact low energy and mood, and stress levels increased from things that we've already mentioned. And then the lack of social connection, which we're all feeling very much at the moment. And that has a huge impact on our mental health and our general well-being. So if that continues the way it is, you're looking at people in the workplace suffering more from like chronic fatigue, leading to burnout, and also leading to other chronic conditions. And even like, you know, what's pertinent to you and your business is looking at the physical workspace as well, and how that can impact physical health so badly as well. So it's probably a good time to flick on and have a look then at our model in the WellNow company to achieving well-being. So our model basically is a three-pillared approach to wellness and achieving well-being. And we look at self, nutrition, and lifestyle as those 3 pillars. And when we talk about self, it's looking at self-awareness. Very few people, particularly I think this is pertinent in Ireland, we don't take the time for ourselves, about ourselves. And so our self-awareness can often be really poor, and we don't give ourselves that time to kind of, it feels selfish, or it's like, what do you think you're doing that for kind of attitude. Do you know the way?
And I'll dispel the myth. That's all of us in all countries. We're the same here. So I think that's a pretty common sentiment across a lot of us. So you're in good company.
Well, it's so true. And it's that kind of self-care aspect. And I think as well, and I don't know whether I'm saying this in a biased way as a woman and as a mother, but you do tend to put yourself way down the list of priorities, and you're kind of doing things for other people all the time. But I think that applies to the workplace too, and people are very devoted to their work. and can often put themselves in the back seat. So it's really important to just take a small bit of time to consider various elements of your health and to look after yourself really well, because you want to live as long as possible, as healthy as possible, both physically and mentally. So it's really important to take that time now to plan out what that might look like. So that's kind of the accountability, self-care and planning aspect. The nutrition part of it is really, in really simple terms, knowing what to eat and when to eat it, but then also applying that to your own life. So it's not just, here's a list of food, this is what you should eat, because that's just too easy to fob off. But it's working with your own personal circumstances. So that's what I would do with a one-to-one client. You'd make the tweaks and changes, and very often they're quite minor, but they can have a very big impact. And hydration is a big one in terms of the nutrition aspect of your health and wellness. We'll talk a bit about that later. With lifestyle, we cover things like stress management, movement and exercise, sleep, connectivity, environmental, which again comes back to like pre-pandemic, it would have been what's your work environment like, what's your home environment like, and talking about both, but now there's amalgamation of both. So it's more complex even than it was before. And then sustainability, trying to live in as kind of optimally sustainable way as possible. But if you picture these three pillars then as kind of balls in the air, and they're overlapping as such, you're really trying to create that balance between the three as best you can, and keeping as big an overlap between the three of them as possible. But there is never a static outcome. They're always in flux. There's never that's my goal and I got there, great, now I'm done. It's ever changing, and we know that because that's life. But aiming for that kind of balance all the time and striving for it really helps to improve your life. So with the synergies between the different elements, you've got kind of finding more purpose and happiness in your life, creating more energy and a healthy mind, and then improving your weight management and having a healthy and strong body is kind of the idea of it. So as you can kind of see from that model, we can deep dive in many, many areas and ways, but I'm trying to keep today as simple as possible because I want it to be tangible, practical, and people can walk away and go, oh, I got something good out of that. So what I thought I'd do is just a simple slide on each of the pillars with tips for each of those that are practical and related to working from home. So we'll keep it kind of short and sweet. So this is effectively the self one. It's the general approach to working from home. And the first tip would be to take the time to establish personal objectives, in effect, goal setting. So going back to what I was saying a few minutes ago, it's taking that time. It might be 20 minutes and that's it. But you might have to schedule that 20 minutes into your diary, because we all know, despite working from home and feeling like we've got all the time in the world, we actually are all much busier. So taking that specific time. So it might be something very big and broad, in which case, when you've done that, you're going to then be chunking down to get those very actionable steps to reach the goal that you want to achieve. Or you might have something much more specific, which means it's a more simple approach to achieving that. So the next one is kind of recognizing where there is imbalance or where your pain points are. So we talked about this, Victoria. There's a lovely tool that I use sometimes with clients called the Wheel of Life, and it's quite a common tool, so some people here will be familiar with it, but it's really effective. It's basically a circle cut into like pie shapes, and each pie shape slice is assigned an element of your life. So whether that's relationships, career, finance, leisure, fun, sport, activity, whatever way you want to lay that out. And then you rate each element to between 1 and 10 in terms of your level of satisfaction. And very quickly you can see where the imbalance lies. And that's a really important thing to be able to recognize. Like, a lot of people would come to me with weight management as their primary issue. And when you do an exercise like that, you might find, in fact, you know, they've been busy having career and family, and they now realize they don't really have much of a social life. So you then work on kind of creating situations where you meet more people. So whether that's joining maybe some kind of a sports club or a social club or whatever it is, or reaching out to old friends again as well. And actually that makes their life feel more fulfilled and they're more balanced, and actually they start being happier and making smarter choices in terms of their nutrition, which you might have just tweaked a bit, and it has a really positive result. So recognizing the imbalance is a really important one. And this tip number 3 is a really important one, focusing on what you can control. So manageable change is really important, and especially at a time where so much is out of our control. It's really, really important to look at the positives, and things like your personal work environment now is more in your control than it probably ever has been. So that's quite a positive way to look at it. And the same can be applied to things like nutrition and exercise. And I kind of say, like, a lot of these decisions you make in the morning, like there's so many choices you make throughout the day that you don't even think about. You choose to get up at the time you get up, you choose to shower, you choose to eat, but what you choose to eat and what products you use in the shower, these are all choices that, like, it would be interesting to see how many choices we actually make within a day. But all of those little choices, well, a lot of them are ones we have control over. So it's looking at it again in that positive light. It's like, actually, I have a lot of control in what I do, and I want to jump on what I can achieve. And you're not going to do it all at once, because that's kind of setting yourself up to trip up. But it's making a plan, breaking it down into small actionable steps and plucking them off. As I say, take the low hanging fruit, whatever you can achieve easily first, start there, and then work your way through them. It might be over the course of a year, it might be 6 weeks, it depends what it is you're trying to achieve, but that's the general approach. So that's kind of the self part of it. So we move on to nutrition tips. Tip number 1 I have down, and again, this was quite hard for me to whittle down because I could harp on. I'm so passionate about all of this. So I've whittled it down as best I can. So eating a whole foods diet is, what I mean by that is eating the least processed versions of food that you possibly can. So you're eliminating unnecessary additives. You're increasing fiber, which is so good for gut health, and the gut and the brain are connected. So you're actually feeding your brain by doing that as well. And you're also getting so many more micronutrients into your system, which are the vitamins and minerals that can be lost through processing. So it's a really healthy approach to eating. And some of the other advantages of eating this way is that it helps to balance your blood sugar. It helps to avoid brain fog and mood swings, low energy, and keeps your gut healthy. And the balancing blood sugar element is an interesting one. And again, I could do a whole talk on that on its own, but it's basically, for want of a better word or explanation, when you eat food, your body gets the energy from the food, and so your blood sugar levels go up. And then they start to come back down again. And when they hit a certain level, you're going to want more food, and then you eat again. If you're eating really refined, particularly carbohydrate food, you're going to spike really high, but it's followed by an equally low crash. So what you want to do is kind of have that wave as slow and easy as possible. And by eating whole foods, but also balancing your macronutrients, which is your carbohydrates, proteins, and your healthy fats, is going to lend itself really well to that. And that applies to your breakfast, lunch, dinner, but also to your snacks. And I actually, on our homepage, you can download a really nice snack recipes and ideas downloadable. And it's got some really nice ideas there for that. So, and that is actually a definite pain point for people working from home. It's those kind of sugary snacks that are all too easy to grab. I'm guilty of it as well. So it's like, it's something that I work on as well quite a bit.
Suzanne, I wonder if I could just interject here with a question, because I know it's something that I have felt, that a lot of us feel working from home, that eating a whole foods diet is obviously ideal and of course what we would strive for, but let's talk about reality. You know, we're working long hours, we're stressed. realistically, we're going to get a takeaway some nights, or, you know, the kids aren't going to eat as healthy as maybe we intended. So how do you balance the ideal of I'm eating really well-rounded whole food meals and snacks with the realities of working from home when, you know what, some nights I'm getting an Indian takeaway. So how do you kind of marry the perfect with the reality?
It's a really good point, and I like to think of myself as a total realist, and I think I am, given the craziness of my house. Two answers to your question. So one is, I like to approach healthy eating and healthy lifestyle with an 80-20 rule approach. So 80% of the time I eat really well, and I exercise well, and I make the kind of the right choices, as it were. 20% of the time I can let my hair down, can have a takeaway, I'll have my glass of wine. So it's not about restriction, it's about balance. And I think that is, so thank you for bringing that up, because it's a really important part of it, because I think it can't be all or nothing. It's not a realistic approach. But on the flip side, something that I, again, could harp on about for hours on end is meal planning. So I'm sure you don't want me to do that. Not exactly exciting and sexy, but it's actually amazing in terms of what you can achieve through the simple art of meal planning. And so I have a meal planning program that I do, but so that is very detailed, because it's getting you to think about exactly, you know, your macros and your micros and how it works across the flow of the week, and using leftovers and batch cooking and all of those kind of things, so that, you know, on that night you've had a frazzled day, you don't know what you're going to have, you'll always have some kind of a stockpile in your freezer, so you don't make rash bad decisions. But you could, in your meal plan, say, this Saturday night, I'm getting a takeaway, and I'm going to get it from X place because I know it's actually quite nice and it's not just rubbish. So, or it might be the kids really want burger and chips and I'm going to join them. You know, that's fine. But it's kind of planning it is the bit that kind of makes the difference, I think, as well. So those two that's a slightly two-pronged answer to that. But tip number 2 then is hydration. And this one is I felt so I had my career change a number of years ago. And when I went back to college, I kind of embraced it all and became that green smoothie drinking, hemp wearing hippie type. But one of the biggest things that I took on board that I will never go back from is hydration, because it is so important. It really helps improve focus, improve your mood, improve your overall health, your gut health and everything. And if we think of ourselves on a cellular level and think how many cells we have in our body, we're made up of between 60 and 70% water. So if you let that dip even a tiny bit, you are going to be impacted in terms of functionality somewhere along the way. So staying hydrated is really important. People do struggle to do that. So it's about kind of figuring out how, because I think we all know we have to stay hydrated, but how do you do it? One of my ways of doing it is I will fill a bottle of water and bring it up to my bedside table as I go to bed, so that when I get up in the morning, I start drinking that. And by the time I leave the house to do the school run, I have had 500 mils of water. So I'm already kind of ahead of the game. And so I think technically women are supposed to have like at least 1.6 liters of water a day, and men are 2 liters. But I would actually up that a bit, because I think it should be more like 2 and 2.5 liters. And if you're doing sport or if it's hot weather, up that again. But that one, if there's one thing you take away from this whole talk, is make sure you're drinking enough water, and do it for a number of days and see how you feel about it. Which actually I was going to bring up in terms of the kind of the self bit, is journaling is a really handy thing to do. And that doesn't mean a big leather bound journal and you have to sit down scrolling with your quill in the evening. It could be I use my notes on my phone and I just jot down a few things, and it might be that you decide you're taking on some changes. I want to check in with how am I feeling? What's my mood? how was my sleep last night, quality and quantity, what did I eat vaguely the day before, so that you can go back and check, and if you feel like, God, I'm feeling amazing for like the last week, what have I been doing differently? So it's just a nice check-in, and it's a good one for self-awareness as well. So I meant to mention that earlier. The third tip for nutrition is to limit caffeine to 2 cups a day before 12 o'clock. This caffeine isn't really bad for you, but to limit it has lots of benefits, and it does impact your sleep and your quality of sleep. And poor sleep leads to hormonal issues, which then leads to kind of making poor nutrition choices. So it has a big knock-on effect. So in effect, what you're trying to do is have the best sleep you can. So limiting your caffeine is going to help you do that. So that's my third tip in terms of nutrition. So then our lifestyle tips. You can see I was trying to keep everything to 3 tips, but I spilled over on this one. And actually what I also usually do when I do like a workshop or something, I will get everybody to do a breathing exercise at the beginning, and I was going to include it on this. I was like, no, I'll just tell them about it as a little add-on. So I always do box breathing because I think it's the easiest one to remember, and it's one that you can do really quickly, and you can do it sitting in your car, at your desk, in the kitchen at work, or whatever. And it's basically the count of 4, and so you breathe out for the count of 4, hold for the count of 4, breathe in for the count of 4, and hold for the count of 4. And you just do that on repeat, even for a minute or 2, and you should notice that you feel much more relaxed and kind of in control, and your body is coming back into its kind of natural state. So if you're stressed, or if you're about to go into a stressful situation, it's a really powerful tool to have in your back pocket to use. So I won't get you all to do it now or anything, but that's a really powerful one. So that's kind of tip number 5, but we won't say that. So tip 1 then here is sleep, and it's about getting quality and quantity sleep. So planning an effective bedtime routine. So that is reducing screen time, maybe having a bath, reading a book. And if you are having screen time, try not let it be a phone or a device with the blue light. And if it's TV, like, don't be watching scary movies or equally hilarious ones either. Game night was one I watched a while ago, and that is properly hilarious. I couldn't get to sleep for ages after it. So be careful what you watch. So so you're planning your sleep and making sure you're comfortable in your pajamas, and you're not too warm and you're not too cold. All of those things make for a really big difference. So stop and think about your sleep routine, your bedtime routine. Tip number 2 is movement. 30 minutes movement or exercise each day, and variety is key. The big thing here is you don't have to be going to the gym, which we can't do here anyway at the moment, or a HIIT workout or something really intense. And in fact, if you're very stressed, intense workouts are not going to help your stress levels. So a 30-minute kind of sharp paced walk is brilliant to do outside, fresh air, and kind of a pacey walk. That's enough, and you'll feel great on the back of it. Obviously, if you are into exercise and you do your HIIT, that's fantastic. But just for those who maybe struggle with exercise as a thing, it doesn't have to be a workout. It can just be a nice walk, but get that exercise in, or that yoga class in, or whatever. There's so many free ones online now as well. There's kind of no excuse anymore. You just scheduling it in is probably key. Connection. So this is the bit we're all universally feeling at the moment, the lack of connection. And one of the big things is particularly that kind of water cooler moment with colleagues in work. So kind of scheduling in and working on having non-work related conversations with your work colleagues is really beneficial to your mental and physical health, to be honest. It's about kind of knowing how little Johnny is getting on in the creche, and it's knowing how somebody's mother is doing, and it's about having a laugh about watching a hilarious film. You know, it's those kind of conversations that help with connection, and that's what we're lacking. And there's lots of ideas I have with teams around that idea of connection. It could be book clubs or WhatsApp groups for swapping recipes or whatever it is. So there's lots that can be done there. And also making sure you're kind of calling friends and family and not necessarily talking about work on a daily basis to keep connected, to keep that, don't slip away from that social connection if you can avoid it. And then last but by definitely not least is your environment. So, and this is, I know where Capella come into their own, but it's about improving your workstation. It's about getting the right furniture, the right, getting plants, which will help with the air. I'm hoping you can't see the quality of my plant behind me, which I've managed to not actually kill fully, but it was about twice the size last year. But it's important to have them. And if your plant dies and you're not green fingered like I wish I was, replace it then, you know, like just having plants around the place, it's good. There's an idea that if you stand and stare at a tree for 5 minutes every day, it's that connection with nature that has a huge impact on your well-being. So that's a thought out there anyway, but to have plants around your house is really good for your well-being.
I think this one's, just to kind of interject there, I think this is a really interesting one, and obviously this is what we do all day, every day at Capella. But what I found really interesting in learning from you, Suzanne, and this is, you know, often at Capella, we focus in on, you know, the safety of your environment. Are you ergonomically sitting correct? Are you set up in such a way that you're going to prevent discomfort at a later stage? But what I found really interesting in preparing for this with you was that it isn't just about the physical. There's such a big mental component to your physical environment. And I think back to something you said on an earlier slide about control. In a year where we've had so little control, you have control over your physical space. So from a mental capacity, and even things like, you know, we work with clients where they might have a properly set up desk, but it's right next to their bed. And listen, we all do what we can with the space we have, but that creates a mental component of there's no real separation between where I work and where I rest. So just that sense of control, that you do have control over your physical space, and it can really have big impacts.
Yeah, absolutely. And even as you say there, like that kind of no divide between that work and home thing. And some ideas around that then are also kind of getting up early in the morning and going for doing your half-hour walk and coming back and starting your day's work and doing it. So you're bookending your day with a walk on either end of the day, so that it's almost your commute again, but it's done for your health, mental health, because you're moving away. You're saying, I've had my sleep, I've had my breakfast, now I'm going for a walk, and now I'm going to work for the day. And then work's done, I'm going for a walk, and I come back and it's home again. So it's a really nice way to get around that kind of mental aspect about everything being in the one place. I think it's really important. And actually just those last two bits, the tidiness and cleanliness as well, like that's, I think, a big thing, because normally if you go out to work and you come home, nothing's changed in the house. But when people are at home all the time, the place can get dirtier and definitely more untidy, and especially if there are kids at home. But it might be that you're living with housemates that are untidy. So it's scheduling in time again. So as you can tell, I'm a big kind of scheduler because planning is kind of key to making things happen and work effectively. So it's really important. And it doesn't have to be massive. It could be like, okay, I'm going to do 10 minutes a day, 3 or 4 days a week. I'm going to change the sheets one day, I'm going to hoover the place another, and I'm going to clean the bathrooms another, and I'm going to do the kitchen another, something like that. But it's so that the place stays maintained, because that impacts your mental health as well as that. So that kind of brings us to the end of the talk. So I don't know if you have any other questions or anything, I'd be delighted to answer.
That was fantastic. I think really great practical tips that we can all apply. I actually got a number of great questions in the chat here. We only have a couple of minutes left here. We'll get to a couple. If we don't get to your question, certainly you can see Suzanne's contact information here. Don't hesitate to reach out directly. I know she's also got some great takeaway items as well, so we can certainly follow up with you after the presentation. So the first question, and I swear I didn't write this, though this 100% could have come from me, which is, I feel like I'm constantly eating, working from home. What should I do?
Well, that you're not alone. I think having healthy snacks available is kind of key, and balancing your blood sugar is that key element as well. So it's going back to making sure that you're having those macronutrients. You're having, so an example of a healthy snack, for instance, is a rice cake with almond butter on. So you're getting your protein, your healthy fat, and your carbohydrate. So what it does is it satisfies you for that bit longer, and it's a slow energy release as well. So you shouldn't be looking for food too soon after that. And what you can do, if you find you're really struggling, you could make each of your main meals slightly smaller and have a decent snack mid-afternoon and mid-morning, and allow yourself that. So that's kind of your intake across the course of the day, instead of trying to hold on to lunchtime. And then you're actually, what you've done is gone into that sugar dip. So then you may overeat at your lunch, and then you've just gone into that awful dippy cycle.
So my takeaway is I can just continue eating through the whole day. Just be mindful of what it is.
And mood has such a thing to play with it as well, like emotional eating, and like it's challenging. And that's another thing I would say is, I wouldn't beat yourself up if you feel you've put on weight in this last year. You are not alone. Things are going to change and get back to some kind of normality where you can regain that bit more control. But hopefully some of the tips have helped with that as well. But I would also, just on that, say, watch what you buy in the shops. Once you have it in the house, it's there to be eaten. And I am guilty as charged of that. And I think as well, and I go back to having kids because it's relevant to me, but I've kind of felt bad for them because they've had such a terrible time. So I've definitely indulged their sweet tooth more than I normally would, but I've also tapped into that box of treats too. So just be careful, both for them, but for you as well. So just watch what you buy.
I think that's actually a great segue. I think we've got time for maybe one more question here before we wrap up. But you talk about even getting back to maybe more of a sense of normality. One of the questions that came through, which I think is really relevant, is I've just wrapped my head around working from home. Now I hear that we're probably going hybrid, as in, part in the office, part at home. So what do I need to be thinking about from a stress perspective that's going to be different?
I would go back to schedule and become kind of really clear about what your week is going to look like. And it could be flexible, like it's going to be different obviously for everybody, but it could be different for you week to week. You don't really know what it's going to look like. So just being really clear with your calendar. This is where your meal plan will come in really usefully, and just planning as much as you can in terms of the various elements of your life, particularly around those pain points. So, like the meal planning part also helps with your grocery shopping. So you're not going to be having to do multiple trips to the grocery store if you can do one big one, and know that what you've bought is actually what you're going to eat for the week. Because I think everybody's guilty of going to the shops and just filling up a trolley, but then not necessarily knowing what they're going to use any of the items for. It's like, oh, I'll get a load of vegetables, but I don't know what I'm cooking with them, or, that kind of thing. So actually it reduces your waste, it makes you more sustainable as well, and it reduces your costs. So it's kind of like, it's a total no-brainer as far as I'm concerned to meal plan. And then that helps structure your week as well. So you're going to know what days you're working in the office, what days you're working from home, and what days you're commuting, and just working your week around that. So scheduling is a really important element there when hybrid kicks in. So
perfect. Well, that puts us right on time. I do apologize if we didn't get to your specific question, but we can certainly follow up with you after, and certainly feel free to reach out to either Suzanne, her contact information is up, and then you would have also received a confirmation to the webinar from our colleague Neil at Capella, so you can certainly reach out to us as well. Suzanne, it was such a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your tips and insights with our audience today. And we hope that this has been really helpful for everybody, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, everyone.